That's right. Continuing the story, now tensions are on a razor's edge in West Asia. Israel's airstrikes on Iran continued for the third straight day, hammering oil refineries and nuclear facilities and killing over 400 people, according to a US-based rights group. Now, Iran hit back with missile strikes, some slamming into Israeli cities. Now, in a twist, reports say that Donald Trump vetoed an Israeli plan to assassinate Iran's supreme leader. Meanwhile, Netanyahu claims that Iran tried to kill him with a missile strike that missed his bedroom window. With nuclear talks cancelled, both sides are vowing escalation, and the region is staring down at a possible full-blown war. Moreover, Trump has warned a total retaliation if the US is hit. Israel has unleashed airstrikes across Iran for a third day on Sunday and threatened even greater force as some Iranian missiles evaded Israeli air defense to strike buildings in the heart of the country. Now, planned talks on Iran's nuclear program, which could provide an off-ramp, were cancelled over the weekend.
And moving on, as I was discussing earlier, oil prices surged again over 3% on Sunday as Israel bombed two major gas facilities in Iran's South Pars field and stuck an oil depot near Tehran. Iran fired back, damaging a refinery in Hafia, stoking fears of a regional energy war. US crude jumped nearly 4% to more than $74. And while Brent continues to hover around $676 mark, that's on top of Friday's 7% spike, marking the biggest weekly gain since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. Now, Iran is threatening to shut down Hormuz, which is a choke point for 1/5 of global oil. Analysts warn prices could shoot past $100 if it happens, though some doubt Iran can pull it off. Ashesha is joining in to explain the ramifications of oil prices surging.
Well, yes, after the 7% uptick that we saw on Friday and 12% for the last full week, Brent crude is up another 1% today, and it has now crossed that $75 per barrel mark on account of escalating tensions in the Middle East. Remember, it was just on the 5th of May that Brent crude touched the recent low of $60 per barrel, and since then it has recovered nearly 25%. So that's the kind of up move that we have seen over the last few days on account of rising tensions in the Middle East. Now remember, Middle East produces nearly 1/3 of the global crude oil requirements, and the Strait of Hormuz is a key waterway that transfers all the crucial oil. So any disruption in supply is likely to directly have an impact on prices. Now, JP Morgan also came out with a report last week where they said that Brent crude prices could touch $130 per barrel if disruption likely escalates going forward. So that's the kind of up move that we could see going forward on account of rising tensions in the Middle East. Now, this is directly going to have an impact on the Indian economy. Remember, India imports nearly 85% of its crude oil requirements, and for every $10 per barrel increase in oil prices, current account deficit likely increases by about 13 to 14 billion US dollars, which is 0.4% of the GDP, and wholesale and retail inflation is also likely to be impacted on account of this. So yes, for now, Brent crude has crossed $75 per barrel mark, an up move of 12% last week and about 1 to 1.5% today morning as well, and any further supply disruption is likely to keep oil prices in focus.
All right, thank you, Ashesha, for all those details on crude. Now, amid these rising tensions between Israel and Iran, the world is staring at possible disruptions in oil supply, with Iran threatening to close Strait of Hormuz. Now, the narrow waterway passage is a major route for many West Asian nations, with almost 21 million barrels of oil passing through it daily. Ashesha is here to throw more light on why this is significant, amid the mounting West Asian troubles.
Well, yes, as I mentioned, Middle East produces nearly 1/3 of global crude oil requirements, and Middle East producers ship about 1/5 of the world's daily crude oil output, this particular Strait of Hormuz. So that's how important this particular waterway is. And remember, in the past, Tehran has already blocked this particular supply route for supply of oil. So any kind of disruption that we Sea could likely put further pressure on oil prices going forward. And now nearly 21 million barrels of oil passes through this particular waterway, which is 26% of global oil consumption. And Saudi Arabia, Iran, Kuwait, Qatar, UAE are some of the countries which rely on this particular route to supply their oil to several countries globally. Now remember, Iran borders the strait and has already threatened to this particular to block this particular waterway in the past. So if that happens, this is likely to put further pressure on oil prices. So that's how important this waterway is. And as of now, there are no disruptions, but analysts and experts fear that if Tehran blocks this waterway, it could likely put further pressure on oil prices globally.
Thanks, Ashesha, for all those details. Also, listen in John Bolton, former advisor of US President Donald Trump, who spoke exclusively with Swati Joshi of Times Network. Let's listen into that conversation.
You know, the Iranian war against Israel really began on October the 7th, 2023, when Hamas attacked into the Gaza Strip. And we've seen a regional war playing out since then. I think Israel waited a long, long time before taking this step. And I believe that they took it now because they really believed Iran was on the verge of acquiring a nuclear capability. The Iranian leadership had vowed death to the little Satan, as they call Israel. With that threat rising and the chance that Iran would disperse its nuclear facilities to make them harder to attack, Israel's decided to strike. So I think this really is a legitimate strike, and we'll see what the Iranian response is now. And I'm sure there will be one.
Absolutely. Now, if the situation escalates, Mr. Bolton, what, according to you, are going to be the repercussions globally? Also, there are a lot of people who are saying, is this the beginning of World War III? How do you see that statement?
I don't think it's anything close to that. Look, right now, it's a war between Iran and its terrorist proxies and Israel. Israel has responded in that war. I'm sure Iran will retaliate against Israel. The question is, will they strike anybody else? Will they be foolish enough to attack American deployed forces in the region, which would immediately bring the U.S. into a war? It would be the end of the regime with absolute certainty. I don't think they'll do that. Will Iran retaliate against the Gulf Arab states? Will they try to attack their oil infrastructure? Again, that's possible. But Iran is having trouble dealing with Israel. Do they need 6 more enemies in the form of the Gulf Cooperation Council? Do they need a 7th enemy in the form of the United States? This is a very strange medieval regime run by religious fanatics, so I don't rule anything out. But I think even this regime in Tehran knows that it's existential to them if they go after anybody other than Israel.
All right, that's the latest expert view coming in on Iran and Israel tensions. But before we get more on that, let's also take a look at all the events that we should be watching out for today. First of all, in India, we'll have the WPI data that's going to come out. In the US, we have Empire manufacturing data. That is something that we'll be watching out for. In China, we have retail sales as well as industrial production data that we'll be watching out for. Now, in terms of corporate action, Bajaj Finance shares are to trade ex-bonus issue at a ratio of 4:1. They'll also trade ex-stock split in the ratio 2:1, whereas the Entertainment Board, that is expected to mull fundraising later in the day. It's also the last day to buy shares to be eligible for a dividend when it comes to Hindustan Zinc. Apart from that, we have the International Paris Air Show today that we'll be watching out for.
All right, moving on. Donald Trump has officially greenlit the $14 billion merger between US Steel and Japan's Nippon Steel, reversing earlier opposition. The approval follows a national security deal giving US a golden share, granting significant control, including board seats. The arrangement also includes $11 billion in Nippon-led investments in the US by 2028, with more planned beyond. The merger faced earlier roadblocks under Biden administration, but Trump now touts it as win for US jobs and steel security.
That's right. Now moving on, the Trump administration administration may also dramatically expand its travel ban, eyeing restrictions on citizens from 36 more countries. According to an internal State Department cable, nations have 60 days to meet security and documentation benchmarks or face full or partial bans. Now, this comes as weeks after Trump blocked entry from 12 countries as part of sweeping immigration crackdown, citing terrorism threats. Now, the cable, signed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, flags weak passports, poor deportation, cooperation, and extremist activity as key issues.
And Boeing has trimmed its long-term outlook for global jet demand, now projecting 43,600 new aircraft deliveries through 2044, slightly down from last year. While air travel is expected to surge 40% by 2030, Boeing lowered growth forecast for passenger traffic, cargo, and global economy. Production struggles and safety concerns still loom, with 737 MAX output capped and Dreamliner crash under the investigation. China and Southeast Asia will drive future demand, while half of deliveries will replace aging fleets, Boeing says. And moving on, three major central banks are in the spotlight this week. The Bank of Japan meets today and tomorrow and likely to hold rates at 0.5%, but